Good morning, everyone.
Hi.
Glad to see your smiling faces and know that you are here with me as we talk a little bit about immigration and what is happening both in terms of the law, the policies, and some experiences that I have had in immigration court and Stewart Detention Center. To begin with, I would, first of all, can you all hear me?
Yes.
I can speak loud, but not necessary. Yes?
Yes.
It's okay, yeah. I noticed that we have this poster out here advertising the Revive ATL event. And I'm pleased about that for more than one reason. First, I have tickets, I think, although there's been some problem, I hear with tickets. But also, it shows me the 4 areas of emphasis that our bishop and the diocese have selected as outreach and social justice emphases. And I heard them mentioned. I was invited to be St. Bart's representative at the first immigration event. They did not really title it. For the diocese. There were 8 congregations invited to participate. We had one session that was informational about what is happening in the immigration system. The second was an opportunity to go to immigration court in downtown Atlanta and sit with folks who were in that process, listen to what happens in court. The third was a field trip to Stewart Detention Center. And I know that several people who are here, Catherine, Sarah, Michelle, Mark, others? Yes, okay, Marcia, Joe, went December 21st from our parish, so they will have some insights. I'll ask them to share whatever they would like when we get to that portion today. But at that event, these 4 topics were mentioned, and I can only remember 3 of them, so I'm so happy to have a poster. But the emphases are children, veterans, refugees, and prisoners. Okay? So this is one piece of that 4-pronged emphasis in the diocese. Before we jump into the specifics, I would like us to begin with the recitation of a psalm. You will notice that there are some spaces. There are no numbers on the verses, but there are some spaces. So let's begin with this side for the first verse and then the next side. So we'll alternate back and forth. Okay? All right. Join me, please. Bring justice to the peoples, O beloved, and your mercy to all generations. May the people be known for mercy, rendering justice to the poor. Let their spirits soar as the eagle. Let joy abide in every heart. May we heed the cry of the poor, the young and the old, helping to free all those in need, awakening the souls of the oppressors. May we know oneness with you, as long as the sun endures, as long as the stars shine, throughout all generations. May we acknowledge you in the rain, falling on the fields, like showers that water the earth. In our day may justice flourish, and peace abound, throughout all the nations. May every heart open to your love, from sea to sea, from the river of life out into the universe. May fears that paralyze the people rise up from the depths into your light. And on the back, may the leaders of nations from all the earth listen to love's voice. May they spend time in silence before they counsel. May the leaders surrender to your love, and the nations serve the Most High. For you heed the needy when they call, the poor and those who have no friend. You have compassion on the weak giving them strength and hope. From injustice and oppression, you redeem their life, and precious are they in your heart. Long may you live in our hearts. May praises be sung to you. May our prayers rise up before you, and blessings of love be freely rendered. May we be ever grateful for the grains of the fields, for the fruits of the vine to be shared with all. And may the people blossom forth in the cities, diverse like flowers in the meadow. May your name live on forever, your love endure as long as the sun. May the people bless themselves in knowing you, and all the nations call you blessed. And everyone together, blessed be the beloved, the one who dwells in open hearts, who guides us along the way. Blessed be you, who come in the name of love. May your glory fill the earth. Amen and amen. Thank you. How many of you have heard someone who is concerned about immigration, illegal immigration, say they just need to get in line and do it the right way. Just follow the procedure. Have you ever heard someone say that? Yes. I hear it frequently, or see it frequently. So what does that look like? What would it mean if people got in line? I think that most folks who are looking at immigration in that manner are thinking about Ellis Island. That people came in through an appropriate legal procedure, and why can't that just happen now? And sometimes it does, of course. But just for a little comparison point, in the year 1907, anyone have a guess how many immigrants came through Ellis Island in that 1 year?
300.
1.3 million came through Ellis Island in the year 1907. This was before we had much in the way of immigration law.
That's why
Pardon me?
That's why they passed.
Yeah, exactly. There were you didn't need a visa. You didn't need a passport. You didn't need papers of any kind. You presented yourself. Screening took 3 to 5 hours, and it was basically to see if you were violently ill. Okay, if not, you were okay. Those folks were also less skilled than immigrants coming to the United States today, which surprised me. I didn't know this. So how might someone, quote, get in line today? What does it look like? What are the pathways that might be available to people who want to come to the United States today? John Oliver can do this much better than me, and in 6 minutes. If you want to watch the funny version of the John Oliver one, check it out on YouTube. This has taken out all the humor and just given us the facts. Okay. Wait, we need sound.
The lies that do exist can be prohibitively long or have sudden dead ends. And for many people, and this is really important, there simply isn't a line at all. And if you think, well, hold on, my ancestors waited on me, not necessarily. For America's first 100 years, there were no federal immigration laws. Our immigration system has evolved into one with complicated and convoluted restrictions. Take country caps. When it comes to most types of green card, which allow you to be a lawful permanent resident, no more than 7% of immigrants accepted each year can come from any one country. What that means in practice is that big countries with a lot of would-be immigrants like China, India, and Mexico are subject to the same numerical caps as tiny ones like Malta. And it's not just numerical caps. The whole system has a lot of restrictions on who exactly can come here. In fact, the best way to understand it is that there are just 4 paths to permanent residency or citizenship. Family, you're related to someone who's already here. Employment, meaning you were offered a job here. Good luck, you won the visa lottery, which I'll explain later. Or bad luck, you're a refugee or seeking asylum. And the number of people going through each path is by no means equal. Proportionally, they should probably look a lot more like this. So let's start with the way that most immigrants come here. Family sponsorship. About 2/3 of green card holders come through the family-based system, which makes sense. If you're trying to bring your sibling over from China, the government is currently processing applications from 2006. If they're in India, 2004. From Mexico, January of 1997. That's 22 years ago. You might try the employment-based path. The way that pathway usually begins is an employer in America sponsors you and you come here on a temporary work visa. But it is temporary. You might be able to renew it if your employer likes you, but there can be limits on how many times you can do that. And even getting a work visa in the first place can be very difficult. Certain work visas are so hard to get, highly skilled people get turned away. Just getting a work visa does not mean you're going to end up staying here, because converting it into a green card can be difficult to practically impossible depending on your skill level and where you're from. You need your employer to choose to sponsor you again, and there aren't many green cards to go around. Only around 140,000 of them are granted every year. And here's the thing, even when you are approved for a green card, there might not be one available for you, because those country caps that I mentioned also apply to employment-based immigration. So if you come in from, say, India, your estimated wait time can be ridiculously high. The family and employment paths make up around 80% of legal immigration. But what about if you are not related to somebody here and you aren't already highly skilled? Well, that brings us to the luck categories. If you are lucky, you could come to America through something called the Diversity Visa Lottery, which I'll let the President explain so that you know exactly what it isn't.
They call it visa lottery. I just call it lottery. Where countries come in and they put names in a hopper. They're not giving you their best names. Common sense means they're not giving you their best names. They're giving you people that they don't want. And then we take them out of the lottery. And where they do it by hand, where they put the hand in a bowl, probably what's in their hand are the worst of the worst.
Okay. There's just not time to break down how wrong everything he just said was, because everything about what he just said is wrong. The country the person comes from is not involved. They don't give us anyone. The people who win are vetted, and obviously it's not done by hand. What actually happens is anybody who lives in a country with low immigration rates to the United States can enter themselves into a computer-run, non-bowl-based lottery for the chance to win something called a diversity visa. And out of the millions of people who enter, only 50,000 win. So the visa lottery is the longest of long shots. It's honestly barely even worth talking about, which brings us to our final category here, bad luck. That is basically refugees and asylum seekers fleeing terrible situations. And America has long prided itself, with some reason, on the fact that it's led the world in terms of refugee resettlement, accepting more refugees annually than any other country. But, as you probably know, Trump does not care for that. He has attacked the asylum system repeatedly, and while Obama set the annual cap on refugees at 110,000 in his last year in office, Trump slashed it to 45,000 the next year and 30,000 the year after that. Things could get even worse. There are now reports that Trump's White House is weighing whether to cut the number of refugees we admit to 0 next year. 0. And if they do that, then please tell me, what is the right way for refugees to come in then? And that is the point here. For all of their talk about how fine they are with legal immigration, this administration has worked hard to reduce it as much as possible across the board. He's made countless procedural tweaks, gumming up the process for coming here legally, which helps explain why the time it takes to process an application has jumped 46% since 2016. Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free. And that doesn't have to mean that everyone who wants to come gets to come. But if you are going to say get in line to people, you should at least make sure they actually have a line to stand in.
Yes.
6 minutes.
Pithy. Okay. So in addition to that difficulty of coming in through one of those 4 paths, one of the things that was mentioned by Deacon John Ray and Deacon Juan Sandoval, who organized and led the diocesan group that I was part of, said that, the law really hasn't changed since 2016, but the procedures and policies have changed dramatically, suddenly. They continue to change without warning. It's like you have a guidebook, perhaps, for ICE or for CBP or whomever, of how you're supposed to do this. And on page 412, paragraph 6, that sentence that says, but you have to provide X protection suddenly disappears. Okay, so little policies and procedures are changing continually. I found a quotes from the Seattle Times, from HuffPost, from a couple other places. It says, for each pathway, additional barriers are being erected to slow or stall migration. The law has not changed. Immigration lawyers are calling these changes, quote, subtle administrative shifts. They're also referring to it as the invisible wall, which I thought was to the point. NBC News reported an email, quote, from a Trump National Security Council official discussing asylum processing with Customs and Border Patrol. In the email, the official said, again, quote, my mantra has persistently been presenting aliens with multiple unsolvable dilemmas to impact their calculus for choosing to make the arduous journey to begin with. So, multiple unsolvable dilemmas is a perfect way to describe the legal immigration system. In addition, ICE is right now targeting not only recent immigrants who perhaps have come across the border without going through an appropriate port of entry, they're not only looking for folks who recently did this, but they're looking for folks who came here 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago, who perhaps had the work visa and didn't get it renewed and have stayed, okay, without the benefit of a hearing. Well, we know how long it might take to get a hearing. People are very discouraged. And those folks, regardless of what violation they are seen to have, had, they may be granted a bond hearing, which means, okay, we caught you. Now, while you wait a year, 2 years, however long it takes, or sometimes months, for your official hearing, we might allow you to pay us some money in a bond so that we know you're going to show up when your hearing comes. Those bonds can be $10,000. Okay, this is not a small amount of money for someone who's very poor to begin with. And if they are not granted a bond hearing or can't pay the bond, then they go into detention. I thought the only people in these detention centers were people who'd crossed the border illegally now and got caught and were put in detention, okay? No. You can come in through a port of entry legally, ask for asylum or refugee status or whatever, and either not be granted a bond hearing, can't pay the bond, and go straight to detention. Most of these folks do not have attorneys when they get to court. They have to pay for their own attorney. It's pretty expensive. We don't have as many immigration attorneys as we might like. And in some cases, even if they have an attorney, there is no legal recourse. They don't have a leg to stand on legally to accomplish what they need to. And so rather than being forcibly deported, someone writes an order saying, okay, you're out of here, they are given the option of voluntarily self-deporting. The advantage to them is they could try again later. If they are forcibly deported, they may not ever re-enter the United States. So many people accept voluntary deportation. Which brings me to what I saw at immigration court in downtown Atlanta. I got there really early. I was taking public transportation, didn't know where I was going. Want to make sure I knew where I was going. So I stood outside for a while, and it was a lovely day. There's a fenced area outside of court where people were lined up waiting to go inside. And most of them appeared to be Hispanic, families, lots of little kids, files of papers under their arms, nicely dressed, chatting. There was a police officer there just, kind of keeping an eye on things. And he was lovely. He went up to people, chatted with them. How are you? Oh, I think I saw you before. What are you coming for today? Hi, little kid. Really nice. So I went over to him later, like when all our group had assembled. I said, thank you so much for your kindness to these folks. I bet they're pretty stressed. And he said, actually, he was a clergy person who was also a police officer, that there were two such folks, that the state knew that people would be distressed and purposefully chose to have people like him there to breathe it, which I thought was truly wonderful. One bright spot. Inside, in the courtroom, it's a typical looking small courtroom, a judge, an interpreter, okay? The detainee is not physically present. They are on screen from Stewart Detention Center, okay? And of the 4 people we listened to that day, 1 had an attorney. 2 men I particularly remember chose voluntary deportation. One man had been here 12 years, another had been here 16. The man who'd been here 16 years had his wife and 2 little kids present out where we were sitting. And he showed the distress and hurt and anger that I would expect anyone to have in that situation. And he spoke about having tried to get an attorney, even having the money, family, scraping up every dollar they could find to get an attorney, and an attorney saying, I'm really sorry, but even if you paid me, I would be stealing your money because you don't have, I can't find anything in your situation that I could argue legally that would allow you to stay here. And the attorney's words to him, which he reported again in court, were, this is just a cruel system. It won't work. It was hard. This particular judge was great about letting families who had come up at the end of the official hearing and kind of sit in front of the Skype video and have 3 minutes, 5 minutes to chat with this person. So this was a real killer. The 7-year-old or something ish chatted with daddy a little while. The 3-year-old goes like this, walks over to the screen. Adios, Papa. No emotion. But the rest of us were crying. But 16. This is a little kid. His daddy's just going away, and he doesn't know why, and we really don't know why either. A survey that I noticed online, Washington Post put up, some of you may have done it. It was asking of the Democratic candidates, there are 20 questions, what are your positions on these things, and then which candidate is closest to what you think. There was a question on there that asked, would you like to see ICE focus on deporting, 1, only recent border crossers? In other words, let go of chasing down these people who've been here for 16 years as long as they've not gotten in trouble. 2, convicted criminals. 3, national security threats. 4, deport everyone who's here without documentation. Or 5, stop all deportations, period. And it was interesting to me because when I read it, I was like, well, the 3 that were most common were focused only on recent border crossers, convicted criminals, or national security threats. And I well, why is that recent border crosser thing in there? And oh, that's why. Because we're now also focusing on people who've been here for 10 years or longer, Interesting. Now, the 3rd leg of this was the trip to Stewart. If you would like to see some photos, I didn't try to pull it up today, but the AP, I believe the Associated Press, just put out a piece that showed up on my Facebook timeline that is a photo journalism essay on Stewart Detention Center. Okay, so you can sort of see what it looks like. We drove, and you all went to Lumpkin, Georgia. It is over 140 miles from Atlanta. It's about 37 miles southeast of Columbus. I think of it as the town that time forgot. It is an itty-bitty little rural town. I read somewhere there are more detainees at Stewart than there are people in the city of Lumpkin. There is no grocery store there. There is not a convenience store there. You cannot buy food unless you go to another city. Recently, there was one restaurant added. John Ray was shocked to see that there was a restaurant there when we went. There was one sort of B&B. There are no motels, hotels, any place to stay. So if you are the family of someone who is in detention and you want to come for a visit, where do you eat? Where do you stay? How do you do this? So El Refugio is an organization that has purchased, with a lot of money from Samantha Bee, a house in Lumpkin that has been beautifully refurbished. I'm sure you can go to their website and see pictures. Many bedrooms, nicely set up, place for kids to play, screen porch, huge long table for maybe 20 people, kitchen, okay? And families can come and stay there when they go to visit their family member. Stewart was originally a prison. It is owned and operated by CoreCivic, a private prison contracting firm. It was built originally with the promise of jobs for Lumpkin. Well, this was a decade or more ago, and it did not really provide any jobs in Lumpkin. Most people who work at Stewart don't live in Lumpkin. They drive from Columbus. It became a detention center after closing as a prison. The Southern Poverty Law Center has an office in Lumpkin. They provide some legal services for people, and they try to monitor what's happening there. So we stopped at El Refugio first. Did you all do that too? Mm-hmm. Yes. And so I'll say a couple things, and you guys just say a little about what you may have seen there. The purpose of stopping there was to, first of all, get oriented and know what's allowed at Stewart. Okay, leave your cell phone here, leave everything here. You really can't take anything in. You need to be sure you're dressed appropriately, like no holes in your jeans and no low-cut anything and no stuff on your t-shirts and, you know, these kinds of things.
Sleeves on your shirts.
Sleeves on your shirts. Anything else you remember? Okay. And we were shown the observation form that we would fill out after we got back, so we knew kind of what to keep an eye out for. And that form collects some information on what did the detainee say to us about how are they? You know, what problems are they having? Are you hearing anything that sounds like improper care? Anything fearful happening in there? So that El Refugio collects this information and then tries to, you know, do something about it if possible. Safety concerns. Anything else you all remember about your impressions at El Refugio?
You may want to know that when, so there's a meeting of the group that's going to visit Stewart, and the only way that El Refugio can intervene for a prisoner is if they've done a referral, either request from a prisoner or a family member. So they have cards for each person with some detail, like what country they're from and what issues they may be struggling with. And so you're given the option to choose a detainee. That's how you identify the person that you want to visit.
The other option that you have to think about is they can only have one visit a week.
Right.
So if they've already had a visit, that's what happened with Marcia and I. We had somebody we were going to go see, and then it took them, you know, half an hour to tell us he's already had a visit. So.
But the nice thing is, family members that come to El Refugio, they can come, like they can have a visit on a Saturday, and then the week starts again on Sunday. So they can have 2 days in a row visit, and that was the plan that they instituted. You know, because people may come from way far away, like North Carolina, and so they can have 2 visits.
And let me say something about coming from way far away. One of the things we discovered is that there is no requirement if a detainee is going to be moved from a center in, say, New Jersey to Stewart, for them to tell family members that they've moved them. Okay? So you can get set up to visit, you know, your brother or your father or your husband in New Jersey and show up and they say, oh, we moved him last month. or he's in Georgia now. They don't have to tell you. They also don't have to tell their attorneys. Now, the attorneys have their official numbers and can find them eventually. When we were sitting in, so let me get to Stewart here. You drive up to Stewart Detention Center, it's really grim. Razor wire all around the outside because it was built as a prison. A very small waiting room. There were 8 of us, so we worked in pairs. 2 people were assigned to a detainee. It was interesting to see how many different languages and different countries were represented among the detainees. I expected all Central Americans, that was not true. Folks from Africa, folks from other places. The detainees we were working with were chosen if they just hadn't had a visit for a long time or had never had one since they'd been there. We waited about an hour before being able to go in. No?
Oh, yeah, we were there longer.
You were there longer than an hour? Yeah. Okay, in the waiting room. Okay. And of course, if they have a family member there that day, they, if something goes on and they suddenly have a visitor, they get, of course, first dibs on going in there, or an attorney. We chatted with an attorney in the waiting room, and she was one of those who began working with this person in another state, and then they were transferred here, and she was willing to fly down here to continue working with them, which I think is pretty remarkable. The person that Stacy, the person I partnered with, and I talked with, you go back into the visitation area and there's a little cubicle sort of thing, half open, plexiglass between you and the detainee, and there's kind of cement block partition here with a phone on the wall, and you're speaking to them through a phone, okay? This is true for families as well. This is not just how it was for complete strangers like us. The person we spoke to had been there probably 10 months in detention. He was trying for the family reunification path, but he was not having any success. His spouse in the United States, and he had parents in the United States, and he has a child in the United States, but they refused to acknowledge him, to sponsor him, write him, visit him. I don't know, I don't know why. Dr. mentioned that it's expensive for families to sponsor, and that may be one of the difficulties there. He has a trade, he's a plumber, and when he is deported, which was coming up, he already had a deportation date coming up. And he was concerned because when he's deported, he won't be allowed to take his tools. I don't know why. But he will lose all of his plumbing tools, so he will be back where he's going without the tools of his trade.
They're only allowed a bag of a certain weight, and so what Refugio does is they have these duffel bags, and they can only put certain things in them. I think there's a restriction as to what can go in the bag.
Right. Don't they have to pay somehow for their own plane ticket or something? There's something about
I
that.
didn't hear anything about that.
Okay. He was terrified of going back. He said there were violent gang members who he felt would come after him there. He did have someone he could stay with when he arrived. He seemed really depressed, naturally. And when we got back to El Refugio, we learned there is no access to mental health services for detainees. That doesn't exist. Okay. He was looking forward to being able to prepare food that he liked from his own culture. He wanted to be deported before his birthday, which was coming up because he didn't want to spend his birthday in the detention center. People are allowed to give a book to them. It has to come from a third-party source. You can't send it from your house. He asked for a King James Bible. He was a Pentecostal Christian. He wanted a Spanish-English dictionary, and we sent them. One item was delivered apparently to him. The other one, we got our money back, so we could only guess that he did get deported. Y'all want to say something about the detainees you saw? Go ahead.
Would you stand up? Okay.
Yeah.
Would you mind, it'd be easier to hear if you could stand up.
Sorry. Because there's a long wait, I was talking to the woman sitting next to me, and she was there delivering the passport for her cousin who was going to be deported. This was Saturday. He's going to be deported on the Monday. so that he would have some documentation when he got back to Mexico. He had been in the United States for 17 years. He had a son who was divorced, who was a single father. The son, everybody was going to have to stay here. And all his family members were in the United States. And he was going back. He came here at the age of 8. He was now a young father. He was going back to a culture and a country that he really didn't know.
So this was in essence a dreamer.
Yeah, I think he must have been.
Well, became at age 8. That's when it would have occurred,
Yeah.
right? Wow.
So apparently something happened with the marriage, and so there was a split up, and he was a single father, but he did have his family here. So the son was with his parents, I believe. It was just a terrible, terrible situation.
So
Others who went,
why did they deport him and not his family?
because he's the only one who is undocumented.
The son was
presume,
born
yeah.
here.
Right. The son was born here.
The family,
may
I
have-
don't know what their status.
Right.
His parents.
Right. So either the spouse has magically gotten one of these, maybe they came in earlier when it wasn't quite so hard, maybe they have a work visa, or they've gotten refugee status or something, or they're a citizen.
Or they're still undocumented.
Yeah, but I mean, why they wouldn't try to deport them. If they're both undocumented, they might try sending them both
But they
back.
might not know about it.
They might not know, right. Others who saw people down there have something you want to share? Sean?
Mark and I, Mark Johnson and I went and visited with, from Liberia originally. He's been here, I don't know, 18 years or something. He came as a teenager, and he was documented. At least he showed us this photocopy of his green card, and but he had broken the law, and they had taken him to detention, and he was saying, "I'm not going to be deported. I'm not going to be deported," but he's probably going to be deported. And it struck me as like sort of the way he described it was sort of like he was there one day and then he was gone. Like he was there one day in his life, and then he was caught up in this system, and now he's in Stewart or Moncton, Georgia. Sort of like a rapture, but it's bad. I mean, probably anyway. And so he really appreciated us coming to meet with him. His family can't come economically, or they won't come because they're mad at him. He described an environment of it wasn't exactly safe inside, because he said, you know, there's a lot of people here who get news and they don't have anything to live for and they have nothing to lose. And so he didn't feel particularly safe. I thought that he was really keeping his faith, like he had a lot of hope, and he was sort of trying to convince himself that it was all going to work out, it's all going to work out, but it felt almost desperate, because how was it going to work out? It didn't seem like it could work out for him to stay in this country. I encourage anybody here to go visit, because when you think about the immigration problem, when you think about a wall going up, that's sort of like the easy thing to think about and react against, but when you go down there, you see like a actual person who is, and a family that they represent, getting, like, there are now eyes to me, they're Solomon's eyes on this issue for our country.
Thank you.
The
Yeah.
person that I was talking about is about to be deported. On the Monday, he was picked up in Gwinnett County for a headlight that was out, or a tail light that was out. And that's what's happening in Gwinnett, because they're operating with ICE. So they're looking for people
Right.
to arrest and deport.
Yeah, when you hear about police, you know, police being asked to do the work of immigration, that's what happens, okay? Yes?
Oh, I was gonna say, you guys kind of touched on it, but is it always in that situation where it's like the police doing the job of ICE, actively finding people like that, or is it, how are these people becoming detained?
No, up in Johns Creek, about 2 months ago, I had a neighbor, they'd raided their house.
Really?
There were like 15 hot cars. That was a whole raid.
They raided their house, their private home,
Yes.
Like,
so they don't have to open the door. And a lot of people don't know that.
Right. And it's pretty terrifying, yeah.
Yeah.
If you're asking whether ICE is the only law enforcement that the people come through, I definitely don't think that.
Well, I think she's asking, do police departments,
Yeah.
are they only found through police departments, broken tail light,
Mhm.
DUI, whatever,
because like,
then turning them over to ICE? Or is ICE directly doing stuff like she's saying,
yeah,
pounding on somebody's door saying, we think an undocumented person lives
Yeah,
here?
and I think it was a bigger situation than just taking out a
because
family.
in my mind,
But, yeah.
is there like, it's gonna sound so naive, but is there like a tip line or someone saying, hey, I think there's someone
Oh,
that
yeah. Okay, sure.
like,
Not in my-
That's a thought.
there's no.
Yeah. No?
But it's happening at the border, a lot of people are
Right.
picked up at the border and jailed.
Yes.
And there are, police departments that are collaborating with ICE.
Right. It is 10:15 now. I have to be on time for choir. So in the next, say, 5 minutes, I'm just going to shift over to what might we do? What do we do with this? Okay? And I hope that we have further conversations. To me, this is the tip of an iceberg. Catherine said something to me about, one of the things everybody can do with no formal program whatsoever is share this kind of information with people. When you have conversation with friends who may say, well, why don't they just come in legally? What's the problem here? Share some of this. Have them go watch Jamal, whatever. Just so that people have a better picture of what the problem and the situation is. The diocese is planning, I don't know when, an immigration simulation event so that you get assigned, okay, you're from X country and your reason for coming here is Y. And okay, so you go to this table and what happens? Oh, well, this is where you get a bond hearing or you don't. Okay, you go to detention, you sit here for 10 months, and then you get this, So you kind of walk through the paths to get a better feeling. Keep your eyes open for that. Some folks might be very interested in being part of a group called Court Watch, which gives you opportunity to do what we did, go sit in immigration court, but with some sort of check sheet of what are we listening for and watching for, and how many people had attorneys, how many people had this situation, what did the judge really do, et cetera, okay, and then collecting that information, and they're doing this nationally. Jane, sitting quietly back there, knows a lot about this, has done immigration attorneys' work at the border, right? Yes. And so there are a lot of resources here. Another possibility is there is a Georgia Immigration Bond Fund. If you have to come up with $10,000 bond and you have all your belongings in a plastic bag and your shoes have worn out walking from Honduras, you can't come up with $10,000 bond. So this is a bond fund that, people make contributions. You need $12,000 to be, okay, here's $12,000, you put it in as a bond. When you finally get your hearing and you get the bond money back, you give it back to the bond fund and then somebody else gets to use it. Okay, so that's another option. 2 minutes, any other questions, comments from me? Jane?
There is one thing you can do, I think, this week, which is the state of Georgia has to take a position on consent to refugees coming into the state. You all probably know that. A federal judge has issued a stay so that it's not supposed to happen, but it would be helpful if you write Bryan County and say that you want Georgia to be a state that accepts refugees. Nobody knows where this is going legally, but the word is that it is open on this issue. I don't know if that's true, but
Thank you. Virginia?
Is it like the old Amnesty International model of if the the judges know that a prisoner has outsiders keeping an eye on him or her, that it helps
I
that.
do not know the answer to that. I
is
think
court
that's,
watch.
huh?
That is
That's
court watch.
That's court watch,
the idea.
right.
So there's a sense
Right.
that, whoa, outsiders are watching.
Do you think it works? I mean, do you think it makes a difference?
So I think it always works to have transparency. I mean, in the long run.
In the long run, yeah. We were told that the judge we observed was the best judge among the ones, the 2 or 3 that do this work. I don't know what it might have looked like if we'd gotten the worst one. Don't know. Any other?
I went down there once and I think I saw the worst one. He was hostile to everybody,
Oh,
the
mercy.
lawyers, the
Wow.
detainees, everybody.
Okay.
One thing that we learned there is some of the people there have been there in double-digit years. It's
Been
not
where?
at Stewart. Some have been there a long time. I mean, it's not, when you think of detention, you think, oh, that's just for a short period.
Right.
But you're talking about years, like,
Right.
wasn't somebody in there for almost 20 years
I don't
or
know.
over 20 years?
If you have to wait until your hearing, and hearings are backed up
Yeah.
the way they're backed up, and you don't get bond. And meanwhile, how much per day is
I know.
Core Civic making? What is it?
A
It's-
lot of money.
Is it $200 and some per person per day? Or something? I don't know.
And how many people have died in detention?
Right, right. So, follow the money. Yes, ma'am. I really have to go to choir. Thank you very much.